The after effects of the war were beginning to wear off in the mid-1920s. Businesses and industries began to grow once again. However, the Maritimes benefited least because coal production was being shut down by hydroelectric power and oil. In the 1920s in Ontario and Quebec, the production of hydroelectric power was growing. Rivers such as the Saguenay and St. Maurice were being used for power more than before, and Niagara Falls was still being used. Industries were abandoning the old methods of using coal, and households wanted electricity for appliances. Because of these changes, Canada became the second largest supplier of hydroelectric power at the time.
At the beginning of the 20th century, the biggest foreign investors of Canada were British bankers. They had invested in the railroad, not the industries, because the industries were very unstable. It was uncertain if profit would be made. At the beginning of World War I, British investment would slow down, but as the British would stop investing, the Americans would start. Canada had rapidly expanded into the economy, including mining, newspaper, and hydroelectric power.
A very important difference between the British and American investors is that Americans took more control over the businesses. This meant the introduction of branch plant systems. Branch industries are copies of American companies that would make products in Canada. This would prevent the American investors from having to pay high tariffs on imports.
The prairie provinces in Canada were beginning to grow in wealth in the 1920s. This is because of wheat that the European countries needed due to a lot of farmland being lost during World War I. The price of wheat began to slowly rise throughout the decade, and Canada was producing more and more wheat. Farmers had made enough money to replace their horses with trucks and tractors. Farmers had created wheat banks that charged lower interest rates than other eastern banks. In 1928, farmers reached a record wheat crop and a major share in the world market. Grain elevators were full, and the price of wheat was very high in the Canadian market. Canada was very successful because of this. People have called the 1920s the oil age. More Canadians were beginning to use cars due to the price of cars lowering. That was not the only use for oil. It was used for the heating and the cooking. Because of this, the demand for gasoline and oil skyrocketed. In 1924, Alberta speculators had struck an oil well that had produced 1 million barrels of oil and a large amount of natural gas. After this, the confidence and optimism of Alberta oil speculators had grown. They continued to invest a lot of money in exploration and development of Canadian oils.
Large amounts of copper were found near Noranda in the Canadian Shield and at Flin Flon in northern Manitoba. Sudbury was producing 80% of the world's nickel, and Kimberley, British Columbia, which housed one of the largest mines, produced lead and zinc. The mining deposits were developed with American financing. The newsprint business became the largest in the 1920s. Many softwood trees were cut for this. It became like this because the Americans had used up most of their pulpwood. Exportation of pulpwood became large. It was bad for the economy because Canada was becoming more dependent on raw materials. Because of this, many Canadians moved to America for jobs.